Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. If you're an avid follower of this channel, you'll know that I love quirky British cars. I've spent many hours waffling on and generally defending Jaguar and Land Rover products. So you would think then that I would be a big Rover fan too, wouldn't you? Well, I'm not. Never have been really. I think part of that really is a generation thing. I know in the 60s and 70s, if you owned a Rover, you were doing pretty well. It was a fairly upmarket brand. But for me, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, they were just rubbish. Whenever I see a Rover being driven nowadays, it's normally driven at 12 miles an hour in a 30 zone, in the wrong gear, by an old boy with very large ears and a hairy nose. You might think I'm being ageist there, but it's a sad fact. They're not quirky, they're not cool, they're not charming, they're just a bit naff. Today I'm in a Rover 75 to see if I can change my opinion of them. I doubt it, but let's see, shall we? The 75 was built when BMW owned Rover, so you would think that would be a match made in heaven, wouldn't you? You'd think that it would be a rebadged posh 3 Series. A well-built, fun driver's car with a bit of a British twist. It wasn't. I don't know what went wrong, but something went horribly wrong. What we got instead was this faux retro, 70s inspired, rose tinted, nostalgic car. And unfortunately, the 70s nostalgia didn't stop at just the design. It also had 70s reliability too. That said, they did sell very well. People kind of bought into the idea. They sold 211,000 of these over a 6-year period. But it wasn't enough to stop Rover shutting its doors in 2006. And when you look at the lineup and the quality of the lineup, it's no surprise really. BMW just asset stripped Rover. They kept hold of the mini brand and did wonders with it. But they just left Rover to die. I know I'm going to get some flack from Rover enthusiasts for this video, so don't forget to tell me how wrong I am in the comments below. But the last 15 years of Rover were not good, and I really don't think you can argue with me on that. I remember driving a Rover City Rover, good name isn't it? I remember driving the Rover City Rover and it had done less than 500 miles. It was like new, it was basically new, it was only a few months old. And off memory now, the window switches were down in the middle, all 4 window switches were here. And they were on upside down. So the top left did that window there, and it was just horrible. And that's the sort of quality that you got in the final years of Rover. It was just appalling. I also remember sitting at the side of a road in a low mileage Rover 45 that had suddenly decided to mix its oil and its coolant. I remember also pulling my back out trying to push a Rover 75 on my own into a lay-by that had suddenly decided to cook its engine. I remember climbing through the back seats of a Rover 75 because both front door handles came off in my hand. They just were not good at all. There was the Rover 25, the 45, the Metro, the Streetwise. They were all disasters. The engines were always tappety, they always overheated, and the sunroofs always leaked. Anyway, hashtag rant over, back to the car. So this model gets a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder turbo, which produces 150 horsepower. Oh, that's surprisingly quick actually. You only get a 5-speed manual, not a 6, so you do, sitting here at 70 miles an hour, I'm revving at like 3,000 RPM. If there was a 6th gear, it would make motorway cruises a little bit better. What a glorious day it is out here today. It's like a summer's day. I mentioned in my XJR video that the XJR knows exactly who it is and what it's trying to be. Well, the 75 doesn't. The 75 comes across as a bad Jaguar tribute band. Inside I've got lashings of leather, acres of wood and an old-fashioned clock, but it all just feels a little bit fake and false. It feels like a fraud. I just think it's insulting really. It's as if the Germans have thought, what do those British people want? I know, let's give them loads of fake wood from plastic trees, loads of leather. Oh, and don't forget the Union flag, just for those nationalist Rover fans. It's all a bit patronising, don't you think? Rather than give us Brits a good car that was fun to drive, it just gave us a bit of an insult. It's funny this, as you drive a Rover, you've got one eye on the road and one eye on the temp gauge. And for a second then my heart skipped a beat because I thought I saw the temp gauge was right at the top and I thought I'm overheating it, I'm going to end up having to call the AA. Anyway, it wasn't the temp gauge, it was the fuel gauge. So we're safe for now. The model I'm in today is a 1.8 litre turbo, and this is the Connoisseur spec. And again, have you ever heard of a more condescending model name than the Connoisseur? It should really be called the 1.8 litre turbo retired bank manager model, or the 1.8 litre turbo golf club captain model. I've been trying to come up with a good analogy for this Rover, or all Rovers in general, to be honest, and the best one I can come up with is this. The Jaguar feels like a traditional British pub with a good atmosphere and an open fire, whereas the Rover feels like one of those fake British pubs that you'd get at the Epcot Centre or Disney World. They're always called something like Ye Old Wagon and Horses or something like that, something equally naff. And that's just what the Rover feels like. It feels like a fake tribute to the real thing. The Rover 75 has been around since 1999, and it was well received initially. They ran it until the company closed its doors in 2006. In late 2004, early 2005, we got this facelift version with a nicer grille on the front end. Presumably that was to allow more air into the engine to keep the engine cool. You can see various bits and bobs from the BMW part bin, namely the climate control is straight from a BMW. The readout on the dash is all BMW. The key is from a Mini Cooper. The mirror control switches look like they're from a Mini. The headlamp switch is straight out of a BMW. And that's all fine because they still work. The cabin is quite spacious, the seats are very comfortable, and I do like the piped leather. You know what this is like? This is like the British version of a Chrysler 300C. Initially you think, oh, that's a good design, and then you start to dig a little deeper and see what they've done, and you just think, oh dear. I might be being a little bit mean, to be honest, because the interior's okay. I mean, it's just comparing it to a Jag is a bit like comparing Apple to Amstrad. Engine-wise, it was quite a wide selection. You could have had a 1.8 litre 4-cylinder petrol, which was the famous or infamous K-series engine. You could have had a 2.5 litre V6, which I know enthusiasts like, but I'm not a big fan of. They were thirsty, and I didn't think that they were very powerful. But anyway, they did sound okay. You could have had a 2 litre BMW diesel, which were a little bit unrefined, but quite reliable. And it didn't have a DPF, so there are no DPF issues. And in the latter stages, you could have got a 4.6 litre Ford Mustang engine in one of these. They did make an estate version or a touring version of the 75, which I've had a few of those and I always thought they looked quite cool. Because this was designed side by side with BMW, you'd expect it to be rear wheel drive, wouldn't you? So it was quite fun and rewarding for the driver. Well, it wasn't. It was front wheel drive for no reason, only to annoy the driver really. The temp gauge actually, while I've been out in this, has stayed at a very steady halfway. Someone has definitely had the head gasket done. It just wouldn't have lasted this long otherwise. It's not all bad. The seats are very comfortable. I quite like the turbocharged engine. It's sort of like driving a Saab 9.3 front wheel drive, turbocharged petrol. Same sort of characteristics. I don't mind the styling. It's a little bit faux retro and stuff, but it's quite handsome, I suppose. The MG version of the 75, I always thought looked far better. Less chrome, bigger wheels that actually fitted in the wheel arches, slightly lowered. The MG does look far better. I'm a little bit torn because I want to like it. I want to like the brand. I like the heritage and the history. I like the Viking longship on the badge, even though it does look a little bit cheap. But sadly, like the Vikings, Rover's glory days are way behind them. It's not bad to drive. The ride's quite good. It's not too firm. It's just a little bit like driving a Vectra or a Mondeo. It's just a little bit bland. The boot's quite generous and the seats fold down, so that's quite accommodating. You can tell it's got its release motor from a BMW because it makes the same noise as my E46. The 2005 model year car, which this one is, was the rarest one out there because they only sold 5,000, so there are far fewer of those than any other model year Rovers. This one, incidentally, is a one-lady owner car with 49,000 miles on the clock and full service history. Having driven this now, I wouldn't mind it going the rear-wheel drive 4.6 litre V8 because I imagine that's a bit of a beast. Just hope that one's got less fake wood. Common issues with the 75. The K-Series petrol engine will blow its head gasket without fail, every single time. That's one thing you can rely on it for. But to be fair, once you've fixed its head gasket, they're quite reliable. On the early models, the rear lights would leak water into the boot, so you'd end up with a giant mobile aquarium. The sunroofs always leak. Thankfully, I haven't got one in this, because right now I'd be sitting here with a very wet neck. The automatic boxes can be quite clunky and troublesome. You often get water leaks in the front footwell. And to be fair, that's quite a simple fix because it's usually just a blocked drain hole under the front scuttle panel. They get clogged up with leaves and other debris. The door handles can sometimes fail because they were BMW parts, I suppose, and BMWs fail. The diesels aren't bad. They're a little bit unrefined and clattery, but they're quite reliable. Overall though, you just get the sense that Rover had this make, do and mend mentality, which might have been fine in the 70s, but by the 90s and 2000s, people just wanted better. And that's why people bought Audi A4s, 3 Series BMWs and C-Class Mercedes over the 75. So no, I don't think I have changed my mind about Rover. I think I was right all along. I've been impressed with the drive of this one, but it's not as good as it should be. It's not as good as it could be. And I've driven it now for 2 hours and I haven't broken down, so that's a first. It's a shame they're no longer around, but it's no surprise really. If you really want a luxurious budget British saloon car, then you really should buy an S-Type Jaguar. They're far better in every way. You get a better engine, better gearbox, a better looking car in my opinion. And no, I don't have any S-Types for sale before you ask, so I'm not purposely plugging the S-Type. So thank you once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And please don't forget to tell me how wrong I am about Rover. I'm sure this will have rattled some cages. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do. So yeah, cheers guys, thanks for watching, see you next time.